David Moore, welcome to Listening with Leaders. You are the CEO of BlueChip Mergers and Acquisitions, which can be found at bluechipma.com. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Thanks so much.
So let's start off and talk about your journey. How did you get into the business that you're in today, which is basically doing mergers and helping companies with mergers and acquisitions, or people?
Yeah, I am the last guy you would think would be an M&A guy. My story was kind of, I guess, off the beaten path. I took the long way. I started my career selling furniture, actually, and I was really good at selling couches and mattresses and stuff. And ended up sort of going through, this was my first job. I was 17, 18 years old. And just that's how I learned how to sell. And then, got to be early 20s, 2021, and had an idea for a tech company. It was an advertising company. Basically, it was a website. And, it's a lot easier to take a leap when you don't have a whole lot of bills or a family and kids and all that stuff. So quit my job and started this company. And before I knew it, we were a middle market company, 60 million in sales.
Wow.
about 7-8 years later. Didn't take investor money, just kind of bootstrapped it. And so my 20s was spent doing that. 2007 sold the company, then started another one.
Good timing.
Yeah, perfect. Perfect timing.
Good timing.
If I was a Swami, you could see what was coming, man. I tell you what. So sold it, started another one, sold that. These were kind of spin-offs or launch offs of the old ones. In about 2010, people started coming to me and saying, "Hey, I don't know what you've got going on, but can you help me look at my deal?" And just sort of organically turned into a consultant. What I learned was it was a lot more fun for me to work on a deal and do the strategy and then walk away from it and never have to think about it again. So I prefer the ending rather than the beginning.
Right.
So just it sort of fell into it. I'm good with strategy and deal structure and that sort of thing. And as I kind of grew in the field, the company grew in the field. So we started adding associates and people and all that stuff. And, really just sort of fell into it. It was, I guess, every deal adds some level of experience for you. And you learn a whole lot along the way. Still don't know, I know a fraction of probably what some of the old guys in the business know, but still learning and still working on that. So.
What do you enjoy most about what you do?
I like this. I like problem solving. And so I'm a guy that, if you have a deal that everybody else says there's no way you can get that done, I'm going to get that deal done. I like being creative and problem solving. I solve problems that, some people just kind of say, "Oh, you can't do that." And don't tell me you can't do it. I'll take care of it. That's probably my favorite part.
Yeah, I'm kind of that way too. If you tell me I can't do something, it's like putting a red flag in front of a bull, right?
Yeah, let's figure it out, right? I mean, yeah.
Or I'll do what it takes to get the job done. Yeah,
Exactly.
So your company, do you represent buyers and sellers?
More sellers than buyers. The seller side, we're basically there's a couple different types of engagements. One would be I wouldn't call it a fire sale, but somebody that is in their 70s that all of their net worth has been spent in the company for 30 years or whatever. Right. And all of a sudden they didn't have a plan and now they need to retire for like a health issue or a family reason, or they're just done. And then we've got sort of the planned exits, which, we'll work with somebody for 3, 4, 5 years prepping to get to a deal done. On the buy side, most of the stuff we do on the buy side is going to be due diligence.
Okay.
So making sure that whatever the sellers told you, if they're represented by somebody, is accurate, and poking holes in the deal. I'm real good at killing deals. I'm as good at killing a deal as I am at getting it done. So, and then the I guess I don't want to call it an intermediary, but the the interesting thing is understanding where everybody's at and what the end goal is, and maybe to help sort of, negotiate and transition so everybody's somewhat happy. What's the old adage? If it's not a good deal if everybody's happy, kind of thing.
Well, in mediation, that's what we say. We say, you got a good deal when people are walking away unhappy, but they got a settlement done.
Yeah. So we kind of work on that because, I enjoy sort of working with the seller side more than the buyer side. I've got some associates on the team here that will work on due diligence stuff, forensic accounting and stuff like that.
Is your business mostly located in the Southeast, or are you all over the country?
All over. I would say, by proximity, my career started in Charlotte. And so I would say 99% of my business is referral. I don't do outreach. We're not cold calling. We're, sort of cherry picking the deals that come through from attorneys or accountants or other clients. I've had companies that I've sold 3-4 times.
Really?
Deal. Yeah. I've got one now that I sold last year that we're getting ready to
sell it again.
Re-up. And so, it's mostly referral.
What do you find most challenging about the business?
Well, economic conditions are navigating those have been more challenging lately than others. Interest rates is a big problem for us and for sellers and for everybody. Nobody's winning there.
People forget the 80s, 70s, and 80s when interest rates were 22%.
Well, that's right. That's right. And, we've been trading, we've had essentially a negative interest rate almost for, since 2008. And so, or shortly thereafter. And so the interest rates are not coming down anytime soon. I don't believe. They're probably going to continue to rise a bit. So we're trying to navigate that. What that comes down to for a seller is it's basically just coming off of the price.
Right.
That's the cash flow of a business has to support the debt service. And as that rate goes up, then it eats up more available cash. So, but economic conditions are probably the most challenging. The second thing is people problem.
Tell me about that. What kind of people problems do you face?
Man, managing egos is a big one. Yeah. And, expectations, people have, I guess, misconceptions about what it means to sell a company. And so, for example, I get conversations all the time and they'll say, well, hey, what's a multiple for, whatever, a tech company? Well, it's not as simple as that. There's a bunch of different factors that go into that. And so, overcoming these misconceptions or myths is a big one.
Well, people tend to overvalue what they own.
Sometimes, I would say it's 50-50. Sometimes it's undervalued.
Really?
There are ways to find value in things that people don't think about. So we're real good at doing that, or I'm good at doing that. But the people problem is interesting. I had a deal last summer, and it was an exit, and it was about 80 million in value. And it was 3 shareholders, and 1 shareholder was holding out because they didn't want to pay the capital gains tax.
Yeah, I've seen that problem before.
Yeah, and so it doesn't matter how creative you are, they just not want to pay their taxes.
That's right.
And so they would rather hold on to it and make everybody else ride along too.
Mm-hmm. And they're not willing to buy out their partners.
Yeah, and deal like that, I mean, that's a pretty big deal. It's a challenge. So. But managing people is a big part of it.
So how important is listening in your business?
I'm sorry?
How important is listening in your business?
Oh, that was funny. It's crucially important. I'm a great listener, but I don't take notes. And so I usually have somebody in the room that will take notes, write down, and make sure that whatever I say we're going to do, or whatever the client conveyed to us that needs to be done, for example, somebody has to drive that forward. And I am terrible at that, committing, we can get this, whatever, financial projections done by, Tuesday. And, I'm moving on the next call. So, so I have to be managed. And so somebody has to be in the room usually to make sure that whatever I commit to, that we actually get done. So,
right. So, but for you then, when you're interacting with people, note-taking is distracting to you. You want to be present in the moment with them.
Yep.
And paying attention to where they're coming from.
Exactly. Exactly.
You mentioned it a couple of times. Every now and then you see messiness, like the story you just told about the 3 shareholders. How often does that come up?
Every deal has a different problem.
Really?
Every deal has a problem. Yep. And so we're, it's almost, like drawing the short straw, right? Whoever's got it. If it's a finance problem, we've got somebody that's going to deal with that. If it's a legal problem, we've got lawyers that we go to deal with that. If it's a people problem or an expectation problem, it's usually me that's working on that. I find that every single deal has unique challenges. But I think the most important part of that are solving those is transparency. Sales, and I'm a sales guy. So a sales guy never wants to say no, right? It's yes, we can do that. Yes, we'll get it done. Absolutely. No problem. I'll find a way. And then people around me are like freaking out. Like, well, did he just tell them we're going to do that? And so with that though, I think you have to be authentic and transparent. And so if there is a problem, I think coming clean that there's a problem right away rather than sitting on it and hoping it doesn't come up later. Right. Is, and that's a mistake sales guys make. You never want to give bad news to your client, but so I've found ways to package that. And, so here's the silver lining in what I just told you. I had a deal yesterday, hosted a lunch here at the office, and we've been struggling with its legacy company. It's been around for about 80 years. And the guy has a number in mind, and it's about 20 million. And I'm coming up with 12. Ooh. 13, right? So we got to bridge that gap. So we're in South Carolina, so we order a bunch of barbecue and macaroni and cheese, and we have some sweet tea, and we talk about it until we leave the room. I wasn't able to bridge the entire gap, but I think people having just a transparent understanding of what's actually the landscape is crucially important. So
in that situation, you sit down with your client, and you say, well, these are the numbers I'm coming up with, and this is why. And tell me what you think about that.
Exactly. And, that goes back to the myth. I mean, and there's a disconnect sometimes. So for example, if you have run a company for 30 years and to keep up your lifestyle, maybe you're, 60, 65, some guys are 70, have just now thought about retiring. They have a number in mind that they need to support that lifestyle going forward. That doesn't necessarily have anything to do with value. Right. Right. And so we have to figure out how to bridge that gap. And so sometimes that's bringing a partner in, like a financial planner or even a bank, and saying, hey, we can do a special type of portfolio, or there's, charitable trust, tax savings. There's all kind of ways we can get there, because all that matters is the net number. The gross number doesn't matter. Right. And if we can get there, it's bringing in smart people.
You run into problems where people have got their identity so wrapped up in their business that they have real difficulty letting go.
Yeah, it happens a lot, and that's not really a problem, except for when there's personal relationships wrapped up in the business. Oh. Right. So clients that are the guys have been best friends for 30 years, and his 20% of his business comes from the one guy because it's a personal relationship.
Right. And now he's selling it.
Yeah. So those you have to insulate sometimes. And so if we get them early enough, we can help prep and teach them to kind of go through, if we can get 2 years, if we can be 2 years earlier, we can mitigate some of that and plan around it.
So if people are thinking about selling, the earlier they can get to you, the better.
Right, because it gives us time to look at financials, and maybe you can make some operational changes to increase the value over, because value is a snapshot of averages over time at a specific date. And so if we can help if we can affect that average going forward 24 months, that it can make a 10 or 15% difference sometimes.
That's significant.
Yeah, for sure it is. But a lot of times people, when they're done and they want to get out, and people are impatient, and there's a cost for that. So
how do you go about finding, if you're representing a seller, that means you've got to somehow put it on the market to find buyers. Do you have people that typically buy these things? Are they?
Depends on deal size. There's no shortage of buyers. especially, after COVID. People are exiting corporate America and have been for a long time. You've got, baby boomers are, they're at retirement age, leaving. They don't want to retire, but they don't want to work for a big bank anymore, for example. And so they will buy themselves a job. So those deals are going to be smaller. They're going to be 5 million or under.
Right.
Bigger deals, and there's no shortage of folks. I mean, I think we have 40,000 people on my list.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And we'll get 40, 50, 100 inquiries a day from people looking. And, I would say, not all of them are serious.
Right.
But private equity, there's no shortage of private equity groups out there that want to do deals and funds. And they're captive. I mean, we know who they are. Every time we get a deal, I put a deal out this morning, I got 15 call requests on the one deal from private equity guys. And so, but there's no shortage of buyers. There's a shortage of good deals though.
Yeah, because everybody wants to buy cheap.
Well, wants to buy cheap, wants the unicorn, they want to invest the money, don't want to do any work, want that mailbox money coming in every month. And those deals are, few and far between, but
pretty rare.
Very rare. Yeah.
So when you have, I take it then that you've got a process so that when you've got a client that's selling a business, you can put it out there that the business is for sale.
Mm-hmm.
And then people who are interested contact you, you sift through all of that, figure out who are the real players here that we want to talk to. And
yeah, and even a step back, I mean, I don't take every deal that comes through.
Right.
So I cherry pick them, and I do that based off of the financial review, because when I'm sending a deal out, I want the buyers to know that I've looked at it. We're not conducting full out due diligence, but I have a very reasonable expectation that we're going to get through due diligence without any problems.
Right. So, and people should know from working with you over the years that when you put a deal out there, it's a solid deal. Yeah, for sure. And then, and those guys, it's interesting. You would think there's nothing worse than what in our business, or there used to be for me or anybody. It's scary 90 days after a deal when the buyer calls. Oh, and said, uh-oh.
Right. And usually, I haven't had any of these types of issues, but, usually it's, hey, just want to let you know, we're real pleased with it. And by the way, we want to buy some other add-ons or bolt on. And so I used to get terrified when somebody would call. I'd see it on my call sheet. I'm like, oh my gosh, and then I got to go look at the deal. What's going to happen? But yeah, a lot of repeat buyers, but, we work with the same folks, but there's no shortage of good, no shortage of buyers, there's a shortage of good deals.
That's interesting. I was a trial lawyer for 20 business and commercial law, and I had a lot of cases involving the buying and selling of businesses where things were not disclosed as they should have been.
Yep.
And probably the most famous case I had is where the partners split the business. One partner defamed the other, drove them out of business. And that person that went out of business was my client. I ultimately recovered $8 million. That was back in the 1980s. A lot of money.
That's terrible. You would think, you would think everybody could just get along, and but not so much.
There's
as far as disclosure goes, I mean, we use, technology is a wonderful thing. I'm a tech guy, so I'm all about implementing technology and making things easier. And in our business, it's tracking. We're not really regulated, except if we're doing capital raises under a broker-dealer license or something like that. But selling private companies to private individuals is not regulated.
Right.
And so, we have a bunch of technology that tracks, due diligence requests and files for, so buyer asks for whatever, some, financial file from a specific time period. Used to be, we would call the buyer or call the seller and say, hey, can you send us this? And then they would email it, and then we would look at it. And now we do these file transfer things. We don't even touch the files.
Really?
Just goes right through. So there's limits to any blowback if there is anything on us. And that's an unfortunate reality of litigation, because the business we're in is very litigious.
Oh, yes.
So we just have to be real careful about.
Right. I mean, people are litigation in your world is just negotiation by another name.
Pretty much. And, no shortage of nuisance suits and, insurance, and it's just, South Carolina is very litigious anyway.
Really? I didn't.
Oh,
I thought
it's
California was
very very litigious. And so, you want to make sure your insurance is paid up and, you got your ducks in a row, because there's no shortage of people lawyers willing to take stuff on contingency fees for nuisance stuff.
And a lot of it's garbage, but every now and then, there's a good case.
It's biggest thing I would say, in our business, that we don't like to do is an earn out on a seller note, because a seller note is sometimes required, but they're almost never recoverable.
They're vulnerable, right? That's where it's seller financing.
Yeah. So if it's any more than 10% of a seller note, we just say no.
I have seen people crushed by that.
I do workouts on other people's deals after the fact. And I've got a deal right now where the seller ended up having dementia, ended up in a assisted living facility, and 90% of their net worth was in a seller note.
Ooh.
And the buyer found out, stopped paying it. And $2.5 million. And it was their last $2.5 million. It's just, we just try not to do that. Sometimes you have to do it as a hybrid model, but we always tell people, whatever you get up front, be happy with that. And then the rest is a bonus.
That's right. It's gravy.
Exactly. But yeah, all that stuff is.
The classic cases I've seen is where there's seller financing. The buyer goes in, pulls all the money out and shuts the company down, files a 7, and it's over with. Even with a secured note, there's nothing there.
Nothing you can do. And, there's no, you can get a personal guarantee or a PG, but you're not going to be able to go get the guy's house.
Right. It's only as good as whatever his net worth is. So,
right.
And
they're actually insulated if they're smart. So
you can protect, I don't know what the numbers are now, but in the day it was, you could protect up to $150,000 with assets if you're smart, pre-paying. So unless you've got high net worth, that kind of stuff.
Exactly. So so that's a ongoing struggle that buyers, guys that have money that are looking for 90% seller notes, like we're not a bank, or they're not a bank.
Right. Right. How do people typically finance these things? Do they have their own cash? Private equity funds, I presume they have their own.
Depends on the deal. Smaller stuff. So the SBA 7A program, which is the government-backed loan acquisition program, they go up to 5 million. And so you can buy a $5 million business with 10% down.
Oh, wow.
Actually, yep. And you have to be credit worthy and have assets to collateralize that.
Right.
But you can do that. Typical 7A is going to be about $1 million, and they're buying in for 150,000. So we see a lot of that. Those are the guys that are buying a job,
right?
Essentially. And then 401k financing is sort of not necessarily a new thing, but it's catching on because the interest rates are so high. So you can buy a business with your 401k, and it ends up being part of your 401.
Right.
That the value over time,
hopefully increases,
and then you pay yourself dividends. You pay yourself salary and then dividends, and so that's a really great way to do it if you have the funds to do it. And then, 5 million and up, or anything over about 2 million in EBITDA is going to be private equity, small private equity, and then it goes up from there. But so one of deal we worked on last year that I got done, it was an $11 million EBITDA. That was a $72 million private equity deal.
Wow.
So good multiples are higher too with bigger deals.
Right. Interesting work. Well, one more question and we'll wrap it up.
Sure.
What's the one thing that we wouldn't know about you, David, unless you revealed it to us?
Gosh. So I have an MBA from the McCall School of Business, but I do not have an undergrad.
Whoa. Now there's a story there.
There is. So I was not aware you could do that, because in my 20s, I was running the tech company.
Right.
And I got involved with Queen's University in Charlotte, and Hugh McCall endowed the business school. It's named after him. And I was part of this entrepreneurship leadership circle, which was about 100 top entrepreneurs in the area. And somebody had said to me, hey, why don't you have an MBA? And I'm like, well, I don't have an undergrad. And they said, well, you should enroll. And I'm like, you can't do that. And they said, actually, you can. If you can take the GMAT and score high enough on it, you can waive the undergrad requirement. Interesting. And so I didn't have anything to do at that point in my life. I was just kind of floating through, life. And so I did that. And, it really, well, other than being an interesting fact or story, it really bridged the gap on leadership, working with other people. I didn't get, as far as content goes, I didn't get any business content out of it. I got the people part of it.
Right.
Which was, hugely valuable. And, but yeah, so that's something that a lot of people don't realize.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm on the chair of the board of trustees of our local law school, and people don't know that you can actually get into law school without an undergraduate degree. You got to have a lot.
You got to be on your stuff, though.
You got to have a high LSAT and really show that you can do the work. But we've admitted people into law school without an undergraduate degree, and we select very rare, but it happens. And yeah, they passed the bar.
Yeah, and I think, part of the reason that I think the school did it was to throw me in. It was a cohort program. I think they were just trying to disrupt the program a little bit.
There was somebody with some real life experience.
I don't follow rules, right? I'm like I'm a crazy guy that does whatever he wants. And so I think it's how it started, but it turned out great.
Sounds great. Well, this has been a great half hour. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me, David. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Doug. Nice talking to you.